Hey everyone, welcome back to their hardware news recap for the week. This one will be pretty fun. We're going to briefly talk about some of the PlayStation 5 thermals and noise discussion that's gone on for the past week. We have a lot of thoughts on it, but we're going to give you some of the most important details just briefly today. We'll also be going over EVGA, talking about the details for its RTX 3090 failures back when New World Beta launched. So EVGA has diagnosed the problem and has some thoughts on it that it has shared with PC World. Going over that a bit, and plenty more for the week. This is going to be a pretty packed episode, so let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by Thermal Grizzly. Thermal Grizzly's Hydronaut and Cryonaut thermal pastes are high-performing thermal interfaces for use on CPUs and GPUs. You can bring an old card back to peak performance by repasting it and doing preventative maintenance, and Thermal Grizzly's Hydronaut is ideal for water cooling and air cooling for new and old cards alike. Cryonaut paste is one of the top performing pastes for extreme overclocking with CPUs and GPUs and has been used in several world record scoring machines. Learn more at the link in the description below. So first up, a sort of important announcement. We really want to do a factory tour fuller length documentary. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time, and we have enough footage to work with it. I'll go over the plans for it in a moment. You may have seen that we just published our electrophoretic deposition factory tour, and that was really heavily edited. We put a lot of time into it. So we have a special promotion we're going to be doing to help sort of offset some of the cost for our upcoming documentary we want to do on production of computer hardware. And that promotion, limited time, limited quantity, we're doing autographed mouse pads and mats, all variations of them on our store on store.gamersnexus.net. If you want an autographed red and black charge mouse pad, blue and black mouse mat in the wireframe design, or any of the other SKUs, then you can pick one up on store.gamersnexus.net. If in the dropdown it says autographed, that means you're going to get one. If it does not say autographed, that means you may have missed the quantity or the time window. And those will be signed by myself and by Andrew, who did a lot of the really heavy editing for the factory tour that we just published in the electrophoretic deposition factory. Andrew actually hasn't signed a whole lot for the team. He's done a few things. He's done some charity signing items with me, but not a whole lot. So this will be a good opportunity to get a signature from someone else on the team who's done a lot of the really creative editing, 3D modeling for GN over the years, and get something unique, and also get a high-quality mouse pad in return. For the mouse pads, this will apply to all of them on the store until we run out. It's first come, first served. You'll want to get in there early if you want to grab one. We will link all of the mouse pad SKUs below and make it a bit easier for you. We have the more recent red and black design. That's the Charge mouse pad, which has a GPU layout with VRAM components, VRAM. It's got a PCIe slot in there, and it's a wireframe component design. Looks really cool, super sharp, and it's one of the first red and black products we've done. It also has a custom red rubber underside, which is actually surprisingly difficult to get, and a red stitching to match. We put a lot of care and time into all of these mouse pads, and this is one of our newer ones that's been really popular. So you can grab that there. You can get the lawn-standing desk-sized wireframe mouse mat if you'd like to fit your keyboard and mouse, and it's got PC hardware component layout on the mouse mat, including CPU coolers, motherboard, memory, all that stuff. We also have the component mouse pad, which is a blue and black newer design we introduced. That's a block diagram of a motherboard, chipset, socket, all of that stuff. And then we have the original blue and black mouse pads and maybe a couple of white and blues left over. Those will all be linked below. Now, the reason we're doing this is basically to fund the effort it takes to do the factory tours that we do now. The most recent one was a lot of fun. We're really proud of the edit. It's very educational. It's got a custom animation in there that Andrew threw together for explaining how EPD works, because when someone says, this is an electrophoretic deposition factory, you say, cool, what's that? And then they say, I don't know. And you have to talk to the engineers and figure it out. So there's really cool stuff in there if you haven't seen the video. But the idea we had on the factory sort of documentary side, for a long time, I've wanted to do maybe a full how cases are made start to finish, 45 to 50 minute area documentary. So it'll be a long video, even by our standards, but it should be pretty unique. And I think it's safe to say that we probably have the most footage out of any organization of specifically PC hardware factories, and we'd like to do something cool with it beyond the individual tours we've published over the last about 5 or 6 years. So having done so many tours over such a long period of time, likely a lot of you haven't seen a lot of the older factory tours we've published, and that's why we want to start recombining them into something really cool and detailed and factor in all the new information we've collected. So here's where you can help us out, other than maybe buying some of the mouse pads to sort of help fund the enormous production and time cost to script it, edit it, all that, comb through 5-6 years of footage. But where you can really help is post a comment below and let us know sort of what type of thing you'd like to see discussed in the documentary we're going to do. I'll give you a couple of options that we can definitely produce. One, we can do cases start to finish in the most literal sense. The only thing I'm missing from cases is footage of the ore coming out of the earth and being refined into a metal. But we have everything else after that. And I do want to get that footage at some point if you run one of those factories. So that's an option. Pretty cool. We could also include some of the R&D in that video to show how it's designed. And we could alternatively do videos like, for example, waste management. I don't know how many people care about this, but one thing we've talked to every factory about is how do you handle waste? What is the waste? How much of it is there? Is anything reusable? Kind of interesting, at least to me, because you go to these places and you realize, wow, that is a lot of garbage that ends up not usable because I wanted to buy a CPU cooler when maybe I could have reused my older one. And then for other ideas, if you just watch some of our factory tour playlist, we'll link below, maybe you'll come up with something that we haven't thought of. Feel free to share it. We're going to try and make something happen with a full-length documentary. Really excited about the idea because we've got a good process in place now that we went through the EPD video and really refined it into something unique and a bit different even for our own format. So looking forward to making that. It'll be a little while out because we have to script it, figure out what we're going to do with it. But the time cost and the scripting cost and all of that will be soaked by the mousepad promotion. So thank you for your interest and your support. Even just watching it is enough to help us out. But if you do want to grab a mousepad, mouse mat that's been signed by Andrew and myself, then you can go to store.gamersnexus.net. And as long as it still says autographed, that's what you're going to get. So if you want one and it doesn't say autographed, then they're sold out of the autographed ones. But we'll have a lot of them up there, so should have a good opportunity. Okay, let's move on. Quick note on the PlayStation 5 thermals. We're going to keep this very brief. Probably dissatisfying to some of you who want a little bit more sensationalism in our response right now. But as you have likely seen at this point, there was some testing done by Austin Evans. He basically points a thermal camera at the back of the PlayStation 5, does some stuff with a noise meter, and had some conclusions about two potentially different PlayStation 5 models following a revision of the cooler. There's definitely a revision of the cooler, that much is for sure. But for the differences in thermals, we're trying to source the new PlayStation 5. I'll put the model number, we'll put it on the screen right here. If you physically have one in your possession, we'd like to hear from you. You can email us at WTB, as in want to buy, WTB at gamersnexus.net. That inbox will be specifically for this. If you do not have one in your possession that is unopened, sorry, but we don't need to hear from you about it because someone will have it. But if you've got one, you're okay with selling it to us permanently, we'll pay you for the console, send us a receipt what you paid if you got scalped, and we'll match it at least, send you back something extra, and hopefully make it worth it for everyone. And that'll allow us to get something that's been untampered with and we can work on. That said, we're also trying to buy one retail. We may end up with one retail and not get one from the community. But if you have a sealed box, then I'd feel a lot better about working on it. So let us know, WTB at gamersnexus.net. Now, as for our thoughts on some of the situation now, we're not going to go into too much detail talking about the information that has been published thus far because we don't have the new PlayStation. And I have a lot of thoughts on how the testing was performed. And I do disagree with the way some of it was performed, and our team does. Patrick and I have looked at it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the conclusion is wrong in terms of the temperature difference, even if we would have collected the data a different way. So until we actually have both devices that we can do A/B testing on with thermocouples and everything else, we don't really have anything to say. Because all it's going to do is produce argument with no data to back it up, which isn't really what we'd like to do. So we'll talk about it once we have one, and we can talk about it. What we will do, though, is we've got a video in the pipeline talking about thermal cameras and sort of best practices, where they're the most useful, where they don't make sense, and some really interesting experimental data with pointing thermal cameras at heat sinks versus getting an actual reading from the die. And the reason we did that, this obviously was a catalyst for it, but we were interested anyway, because in the past, AMD and Intel both, to memory, have shown press thermographic images of heat sinks and then said something about their CPU temperature as a result. And it's always been like, that's Intel and AMD, your team should know that's not how you do it, but it makes a pretty marketing image. So we'll be talking about that, and it's sort of a broader topic, not meant as a response, but rather meant as a PSA, and hopefully just something kind of fun for everyone, a little bit more on the sciencey side to talk about how they work. So that's been tested. We just need to do the writing, and we have no comment right now on the PlayStation 5 models and how they may differ, other than to say that we are working on it, and when we have one, we'll comment on it. So that's it for that topic. Sorry to not satisfy the demand for maybe a more aggressive response, but this is not what we do if we can't produce data. So we'll come back to it. Hopefully we get one soon. We're talking with Digital Foundry as well, have some collaboration ideas if we can make it all work. That'd be a lot of fun. All right, EVGA offers details on Amazon's New World bricked RTX 3090 card. You may have heard about this in the past. New World, when it launched the beta, made some serious waves when the beta rolled out because it quickly claimed the life of several extremely expensive and difficult to find video cards. It's about the worst thing in terms of a computer part you could kill right now. At the time, the majority of the bricked cards seemed to concentrate most heavily on EVGA's RTX 3090 lineup. Specifically, the FTW3s were mentioned online. We did see reports of other cards failing. At least one of you might have emailed us about a 6900 XT or something. But definitely these were heavily concentrated on the 3090s. With as many cards as there are out there, if it's one-off report like the person's 6900 XT we saw, then it's kind of hard to know if it was actually the game that killed it or maybe they had a gigabyte power supply. But either way, it's not 100% clear what the source of those deaths were. EVGA, however, has made it clear what it thinks was the cause of the death of its 3090s that died. In a report from PC World, which does fantastic work, you should check out this one. We'll link it in the source document below. They have a YouTube channel as well. You should check them out. Gordon Mahan's over there. He's been in the industry a long time as a great reporter and journalist in PC hardware. So he talked with EVGA about the issue. And to give you a recap, but check his stuff out for the details, EVGA said that it received, quote, about 24 of the bricked RTX 3090 cards, and it told PC World that all the affected cards were manufactured in 2020. So they have a specific range and maybe a batch. They also said that after X-ray analysis, the failure was attributed to soldering work around the MOSFETs. EVGA said that all of its affected cards were limited to RTX 3090 models, and the company expedited replacement cards out to impacted customers instead of waiting for the ARM-made cards to arrive. While EVGA didn't offer any details on how many RTX 3090s it has sold to date, which isn't really unexpected, the company did note that these failed cards represent fewer than 1% of all devices the company has sold in the 3090 category, and that's, again, about 24 of them or so. Additionally, EVGA and NVIDIA have been working with Amazon Games, developer behind New World, to try and replicate the issue that managed to cause the cards to fail. And while EVGA has yet to internally reproduce the issue, the game got patched, if you don't remember, so that makes it challenging. It is working to develop a method to screen for that particular power profile that the game triggered. Lastly, EVGA threw some cold water on some of the early theories that arose from what might have caused the failures. One of them was specifically relating to its fan controller. EVGA said that, quote, in no way, shape, or form is the failure related to the fan controller. This is going back to where there was some initial speculation or analysis that postulated that perhaps, especially the ICX controller, which is a controller part of EVGA's lineup of cards that has what it calls ICX technology, basically means the fans are separately controllable, so you can operate each fan individually for GPU, memory, power area, and also they have NTC thermistors planted around the board. So the theory was that this controller that is involved in all of that for the special model was the cause of the failures, and EVGA says, no, it's not. It was related to soldering around the MOSFETs. So you might call this a factory defect or something to that extent. Issue's been resolved as far as we know, and both Amazon and EVGA have put measures in place. Amazon's was a little bit silly. They capped the frame rate, but EVGA's is hopefully more permanent. And in theory, all the customers who were affected should have been helped at this point, and if you haven't been, email EVGA and get their assistance. Up next, Intel preps for Alder Lake with XTU version 7.5.1.3. Alder Lake, as a reminder, is the new upcoming desktop CPU. It'll be an enthusiast class chip with the K SKUs, but also span all the way down to usual consumer use. As we inch closer to Intel's looming Alder Lake S release, Intel is preparing its XTU monitoring and tuning application for the new silicon. Intel's Alder Lake S will provide a significant change-up to Intel's platform complexion with a hybrid core topology and DDR5 support, just to name a couple of key highlights. We actually ran a video not too long ago where we reported on some of the architecture details of Intel's upcoming CPUs. It's very interesting. It's pretty educational. There's no performance detail because we didn't have any at the time, but you might like it just to learn a little bit more about how the CPUs are being built, and that'll cover some of the basics for Alder Lake for you. That's available on the channel. Also, I ranted about nouns, adjectives, and D&D terminology in that video, so that's fun. With version 7.5.1.3, the release notes highlight the following: enhanced future platform support, added support for hybrid performance and efficient core architecture, added support for Intel Speed Optimizer, and then they go on to talk about memory, predictably, like timings, DDR5 support. They talk about per core OC TVB, or thermal velocity boost support, and package OC TVB support. Intel also added volt frequency curve support. It removed B-clock UI control, or base clock, and it added hardware bot integration for Benchmark 2.0 and removed it for Benchmark 1.0. Additionally, there's a fix for voltage-related reboot issues. We assume at this point XTU is now properly equipped to be able to accurately monitor Alder Lake for performance and efficiency cores. This is one of the key items that will change with Alder Lake. There are now P cores and E cores. They function differently. We'll leave it to the architecture video. If you're not familiar with the terminology, you can learn it there. And Intel's also extending its one-click overclock feature, speed optimizer, etc., to Alder Lake, and memory timings tuning, as usual, will be available to some extent in XTU. XTU isn't our favorite overclocking tool. We've used it in the past, especially for, actually suitably, Hades Canyon. It's more of a you have no other options tool. It's not bad. It's just that it's cumbersome with overclock. You don't need all that UI and all the fancy stuff they do with it. It does, however, work, and normally you can trust it to at least be accurate with what it's reporting, which is more than can be said for other applications that aren't made by Intel for an Intel CPU. Not our favorite, but it is worth playing around with if you need some additional tools for a product that maybe isn't supported well in BIOS. Up next, some Windows 11 news. Windows 11 has been in the news a lot recently, obviously. It's a major switchover. And Microsoft has confirmed at this point that it'll begin rolling out on October 5th of this year. And it notes that Windows 11 will be available on newly purchased hardware on that date, and also available for eligible PCs. The eligibility of those PCs, however, remains a hill that Microsoft is prepared to die on. It hasn't backed off too much from the Windows 11 requirements, whether or not they're actual real requirements in terms of capability of running Windows 11. And as with most things Microsoft and Windows, the rollout is going to be a little bit complicated. Microsoft states that Windows 11 will be rolled out in phases, and it will have new devices receiving the upgrade first. Afterwards, the upgrade will be delivered to existing in-market devices, quote, based on the intelligence models that consider hardware eligibility, reliability metrics, age of device, and other factors that impact the upgrade experience. If you had forgotten, just a reminder that Vista had a device experience score which included such weighted metrics as the capacity of your hard drive to determine the performance of the computer. So we'll see how intelligent the metrics are in reality. Microsoft also confirmed that Windows 11 will not include Android app support at launch. It said, quote, we look forward to continuing our journey to bring Android apps to Windows 11 and the Microsoft Store through our collaboration with Amazon and Intel. This will start with a preview for Windows insiders over the coming months. Microsoft expects that all eligible devices will be offered Windows 11 as an upgrade by mid-2022. As ever, should you be so lucky, Windows Update will be hounding you about Windows 11 as soon as you're able to get it, so you certainly won't need to look hard to see if you're eligible. Microsoft also took the opportunity to boldly plug purchasing a new PC, stating, quote, and this is a real quote, there's never been a better time to purchase a new PC. Microsoft, have you surveyed the room and maybe what it sounds like or what it reads like? Never a better time, except a global pandemic with unprecedented shortages, if we're going to use the phrasing every company uses, wherein it is difficult to actually get the parts for a new PC. But otherwise, the fact that they're difficult to get, notwithstanding, there's never been a better time to get them, so that's good. Additionally, Microsoft announced a slight hack for installing Windows 11 on an unsupported machine. Microsoft clarified that it won't block users from installing Windows 11 manually via an ISO image. However, it said that the caveat is that those machines will be severed from Windows Update and will not receive Windows updates and patches. You would certainly not want to have a machine that is incapable of getting Windows Update, and so nobody should install it this way, because definitely everyone wants updates. There's some security benefit, potentially a lot, but if you have a specific idea for what the PC is going to do and you're not worried about security because it's isolated somehow, then maybe this is a good way to install it. Fractal Torrent. So we reported on the recall of the Nexus 9P slim fan hubs found in the Fractal Torrent. We talked about this a couple weeks ago. Fractal got way ahead of the issue. You can watch the video if you want a recap of it, but basically they discovered a short, or their users discovered a short in the fan hub. It was to a similar degree potentially of what NZXT's PCIe riser short was like, except Fractal got ahead of everybody, put out a report stating that they had found the issue or were investigating the issue, and immediately offered to do replacements for everybody who has purchased the device, and recalled the case from the channel, so recalled it from retailers, to do the fix and then send it back out to be sold, rather than just letting them sell through and hoping those users will check the internet on the device they purchased. We've been in regular contact with Fractal since then, and we can confirm some of our earlier deductions. The 12-volt plane can short into the case body if the protective PCB coating is damaged during installation. That's either by you if you take it out and put it back in, or by the factory if it's maybe over-torqued. This is both a design flaw and an assembly error, as initially reported. Fractal's team informed us that as of August 31st, they had detected problems with 8 out of 479 units pulled for internal testing, so 1.7%. And with this type of failure, where a short circuit can and has led to fire, it's 1.7% is absolutely enough to warrant this type of recall, especially because if they're talking about 480 units, we don't know how many they actually bought to sell, but 479 is a weird enough number where it starts to sound like most of the quantity, at least that they had in their local warehouses. So it's a new case. There's not that many out there. It made a lot of sense to try and fix this before they shipped more of them, at which point they would have really had a high cost to deal with like NZXT did. So we'll discuss the technical details once we have access to the redesigned fan hub. We should have one on the way. Like the NZXT H1, the design flaw technically affects all units, despite the 8 out of 400 something number. And that's because the fan hub can be shorted from the design flaw. Just because it hasn't yet, it hasn't today, doesn't mean it won't ever, especially as it is taken out and reinserted and potentially sold to someone else later. So if you have the case, get rid of the fan hub. Fractal will replace it for you. Maybe they want it back, in which case send it to them. And if they don't, or if you find an alternative like buying your own fan hub, we would recommend destroying the original fan hub so that no one can accidentally use it later, or so that you don't forget there's a problem with it and plug it back in at some point in a few years and potentially have a problem. So just destroy it and send it to e-waste recycling. That should be the end of that story. You can apply for a free fan hub replacement kit if you own a Torrent. Just Google search for that and they'll take care of you. So new malware, proof of concept, allowing for malicious code to hide in GPU VRAM. This one, it's not new for malware in general to hide itself in, well, in memory at all, or in GPU VRAM specifically. This, however, is a new proof of concept. It's interesting. It allows for malicious code to hide within the memory buffer of the GPU. It can reportedly be executed from a GPU's VRAM as well. And NVIDIA and AMD, of course, have already built protections into their most recent, lower-end but extremely expensive cards by offering you anywhere from 30 to 50% of the memory that you should be getting at that price. So it's a feature. They're not trying to cut costs. They're just trying to protect you from malware that can hide in VRAM if they were to provide you enough of it for the money you're paying. Gotta look at the positive side. As Bleeping Computer notes in its report, this technically isn't the first time the world has seen such a feat. Security researchers published a Windows GPU rootkit proof of concept to show all of this, and in a popular hacking forum, there was a post offering to sell a proof of concept for a technique that evades security protections, like, for example, antivirus scanners, by obscuring the malicious code in GPU memory. Typically, antivirus software scans areas such as system storage and DRAM, but wouldn't generally be sweeping a graphics card's VRAM. The post didn't mention many details, but did claim to have verified the technique on a handful of GPUs from Intel, IGPs, and then GPUs from AMD and NVIDIA. The method also only works on Windows systems and requires OpenCL 2.0 or higher. The date of the post was August 8th, and it seems like as of August 25th, the proof of concept has been sold for an undisclosed sum. In response to this news, security researchers at VX Underground and its threat repository stated that they would work to demonstrate this technique in the near future. Of course, it wouldn't be a week of hardware news without some leaks. Another week has gone by, and so that means another test lab has forgotten to uncheck the upload results to the internet box in software. This time, it's a Threadripper 5995 WX Pro. We're getting towards Intel naming territory with that one. And that was leaked via Puget Bench for Metashape. This isn't even the first time, actually, that the 5995WX has leaked, because previously the CPU appeared in the Milky Way at Home database alongside the 5945X. That was about a week ago. The 5995WX is the top of the line for the technically rumored Zen 3 Threadripper Chagall CPUs, with 64 cores and 128 threads. The system in question was equipped with an RTX 3080, Metashape supports GPU acceleration, and Puget itself has data for GPU performance scaling in this very benchmark. So this isn't the best opportunity or the best benchmark for comparative CPU analysis. Theoretically, some extremely rough ballpark comparisons could be made to the Puget results we just mentioned, where a 10900K was paired with an RTX 3080 as well, but we'll leave you to do the math on that one. The 128 thread CPU obviously scores higher. We look forward to testing that if we're able to once it comes out. And the Pro line, by the way, is the one that for Threadripper runs 8 channels. So that's the main differentiator when you get the word Pro thrown into Threadripper as opposed to quad channel. AMD CPU Flaw is the correct word to use here. 2 researchers from TU Dresden have published a white paper detailing an AMD Zen Plus and Zen 2 flaw that they reported to AMD about a year ago. Typically, there's a period of time wherein researchers will report the defect to the company prior to reporting it publicly to allow for potential mitigations to be put in place and prevent damage as a result of reporting on the exploit or vulnerability, or in this case, flaw. And AMD has some responses already. Zen Plus and Zen 2, as a reminder, would be the 2000 series of CPUs and the 3000 series of CPUs in the Ryzen lineup. Then it gets messy once you get outside of Ryzen desktop. AMD has officially acknowledged the discovery. It has published a severity rating of medium and a recommendation to software vendors to analyze their code and patch vulnerabilities that emerge as a result of the code. One of the researchers has expressed regret over how the flaw has been described by media, saying, quote, "It is a hardware flaw which leads to side channels," and, quote, "This is not a vulnerability," in all caps, just a flaw in the hardware. As for what the specific difference is, what he means by this with the specific differentiation between flaw and vulnerability is that affected AMD processors have a flaw that allows unintended behavior to be forced, and that this could become a vulnerability or strengthen existing exploits. But the white paper itself doesn't go as far as describing a workable vulnerability. This is opposite from the more disastrous and wide-reaching Spectre and Meltdown exploits from about 2018, wherein they were not only exposing flaws in design, but also provided proof of concept exploits where there were definite harmful consequences as a result of those proofs of concept. AMD has released a guide for mitigating software vulnerabilities relating to the flaw for software vendors who may be affected, and otherwise there's not much actionable beyond that. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, if you want to support us, you can go to store.gamersnexus.net and pick up one of the mouse pads, as we mentioned earlier. Otherwise, please check out the factory tour that we just published. It's cool. We liked it a lot. I think you might learn something and kind of fun. So check that out on the channel. Link it below as well. And subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.